There's a dark side to leadership, and we're talking about that today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew.
Hey.
AJ, we're talking about the dark side of leadership.
I think we've both put on like our low, dark voices for this
Dark
too.
side.
We're recording this earlier in the day than we typically record those.
That's it. I haven't got enough
We've
words
got-
in yet to
we've
get
got
my voice
enough.
going.
So we're going to explore 5 common emotional disorders. We are not therapists or psychologists or psychotherapists or psychiatrists or any of that.
We're not any-ist, I guess.
No. But we do know a thing or two about leaders and working with leaders. And so some of the things we're going to talk about are things we've seen before in leaders that we've helped to work with and so on. But the content of this article and what we're going to be talking about in today's podcast comes from Aubrey's last book that he published before he passed away, which is Developing Emotionally Mature Leaders. The book, like many of Aubrey's books, the first half of it is content, and the second half of the book, I mean, it's almost 50% of the book is appendices and audits and all these kinds of things. And if you like that really practical stuff that you can use when you buy a book, I would recommend this one, especially if you pair it up with some other book on emotional intelligence, like the stuff by Pete Scazzaro or something like that. It's a good companion to have on your bookshelf. And so the discussion about these and the content about these 5 emotional disorders and how they apply to leadership comes straight from this book. So credit to Aubrey and his work in helping us prepare for this episode. Before we dive in, AJ, and explore each of these, I just want to mention I'm one of the things that I get to do in my work with churches is I get to conduct like temperament assessments, and we actually have some audits on these emotional disorders and things from when I work with churches on leadership pipeline design. We don't do it all the time, but we do it more and more. We're doing more of it. And one of the things that's always stood out to me is that depending on your temperament, you're going to have a proclivity or an inclination towards one or more of these emotional disorders. It seems to be tied to your temperament. I love the DISC, as you all on this podcast probably know at this point. And the thing about the DISC is every temperament type in the DISC, and if you're not familiar with DISC, we did a whole Deep on DISC series. We have an episode on each of the 4, on the D, the I, the S, and the C. You can go back and find those. But each of those temperament types has a strength and sort of has a dark side to it. And it's my belief, and again, I'm not a psychologist, AJ, but it's my belief that these emotional disorders, all of us have, all of us battle these to some degree. And the ones that we battle with are tied, I think, to some degree to our temperament, our natural wiring. And so I think as we're going through these 5 things, it'd be best not to think, oh, I'm good, this doesn't describe me at all. I think that just know there's going to be at least one of these probably as we go through it. You go, I battle that. That doesn't mean you're necessarily, you have an emotional disorder and you're screwed up or any of that, but you're human and you have vulnerabilities, and it's good to be honest about that, because when you're a leader, you have to battle that dark side of leadership, and self-awareness, I think, is the key. So that's the goal today. Wow, I have done this whole introduction, AJ. What do you have to add to that before we hop into these?
That's good. You're the expert, Scott.
Don't call me an expert.
Yeah,
I don't want to be held liable for that.
You're the experiencist in this. So yeah, and so you kind of, I was going to jump in and go, hold on, but you kind of corrected you. I think what you meant there at the end, everybody doesn't battle a diagnosable disorder. Everybody battles select characteristics that are a part of a diagnosable disorder. And that's, again,
Yeah.
as you said, that's humanity. And that's especially sinful humanity.
Yeah,
That
that's a good point.
we've got things going on.
I think that in contemporary society we have a tendency. I don't want to go off on this tangent, but we have a tendency to over label everything. Like,
Yeah.
I'm procrastinating today, therefore I must be neurodivergent or something. Like we have a tendency to want to slap a label on everything, and I think that's a negative. I think the benefit is if you can put a name to something, it can become easier to work on. So find that happy medium. I think to just go, well, I'm human, and excuse it is maybe not good. So maybe as you're listening through these things, I'm not saying you need to go see a psychotherapist. I'm not suggesting that. I am saying as you listen to these things and you go, oh, that resonates with me, that's something I struggle with, maybe having some of that language would help you go find a resource that can help you combat that tendency that you have towards a thing that is an emotional disorder. So find that happy medium. If there's some in between thing where it's like good to have some language around it, but bad to over diagnose everything, find that happy medium. And that's where we're trying to land today.
Yeah. Some of these have become quite popular, and people know they don't really have a diagnosed condition. They recognize characteristics and then they go ahead and grab the label. And the two most popular are ADHD or ADD and OCD. And you hear people all the time, oh, that was my OCD kicking in. I'm like, no, maybe you just like, to have your desk clean, or maybe you I just want to, you appreciate order.
We're diving in. Let's
So
start moving through these.
All right, let's get going. So we've got
Since that's the
5 of
first
these. Yeah, we've got 5 of these, and the first one is the obsessive compulsive leader. Because again, this is a leadership focused dive that we're doing here on, because the implications are for you, a leader in a church, a pastor, or somebody that's involved in leadership. Probably that's most of our audience. So yeah, the obsessive compulsive leader. And again, this Aubrey in the book has put this in the context of people that probably would be a higher up on a scale of the condition, in which perhaps an expert, an actual doctor, might diagnose them with a condition. But again, if you've got any strong characteristics of this, then it could be affecting your leadership capacity and relationships around you in the church environment that you work in. So Scott, tell us a little bit more about the characteristics of the obsessive compulsive leader.
Yeah. Obsessive compulsive leaders have a tendency to want and need to control everything, control their environment, control circumstances, control outcomes, and so on. In fact, and I've done a lot of these assessments with people at this point, and this is the most common one that comes up, is the obsessive compulsive leader. And because I think maybe, I don't know, I don't want to prognosticate too much. I think there's a desire for control in humanity in general. So this is probably the easiest one to slip into. But the key about obsessive compulsiveness is the idea of I have an obsession with control, therefore that fuels compulsions that I have to maintain a sense of control. It's the compulsion part that I think the desire for control is maybe universal, but the leading to compulsions, I have to do this in a certain way. I have to, and then projecting that onto you. You have to do it this certain way. And so if you are working with a team and you've delegated something to them, and then they start to execute it in a way that's different from the way you would do it, if you find yourself going, no, not that way, you have to do it this way, and there's not any real good reason for that tied to the outcome or tied to safety or something like that, then that's a that is a signal that, oh, I'm being a little obsessive compulsive here, and I maybe need to back it up. So obsessive compulsive leadership is not, I'd like to have a tidy desk. It's a sense that, oh, if I don't leave my desk in this particular way, I can't feel good about myself, or I can't be successful in ministry. It's that lie that you tell yourself that my whole self-worth is tied to my controlling of my circumstances and the people around me. And that's not a healthy thing to think, or a healthy place to be. So some people I do not, this is not one that I struggle with at all, as evidenced by, I've got a piece of paper kind of like stacked over here. This is not a struggle for me, but it is a common one for a lot of leaders.
Yeah. And it's the only one I had never really, I guess, spent a whole lot of time thinking about obsessive compulsive, until preparing for this podcast. But I mean, out of the 5 we're talking about, it's the only one it's a hyphenated word, obsessive hyphen compulsive. And as you were just describing, there's kind of these 2 sides to it. There's something that I'm obsessing about, and perhaps control is it, leading to a compulsion to behave in a particular way. You could probably break each of these down that way. There's some kind of a driver, and then there's a reaction or action that takes place. But, this is, if you hadn't ever really considered that, I mean, that's why this is a hyphenated 2-word disorder, because of this kind of cause and effect that's happening. But
and we all know the classical things like that you'd see in a clinical case, like I've got to touch the doorknob this many times, I've got to wash my hands this many times. I'm not talking about that. We are talking about this not in a clinical sense, but in a leadership setting. Am I exhibiting these kinds of behaviors in a leadership context? This is not, again, just to reiterate, not a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing. We're not going to get into it today in this episode, but when you go over to read today's show notes, or if you pick up a copy of Aubrey's book, actually dropped in a little bit of biblical reference in there. Like, here's maybe a character in the Bible or some particular passages in which perhaps some characteristics of this style of leadership, not style, but perhaps disordered leadership, is evidenced in Scripture. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. So we'll give you that link here at the end of the episode. All right, the next one we're going to talk about, the narcissistic leader. Ooh, and these folks can be particularly damaging to ministry. Eventually, perhaps to themselves in a work environment. But they can collect some folks around them that could be left hurting for quite a while, because the narcissistic leader is extremely self-centered, self-focused, and they could just leave nothing but brokenness in their wake behind them. I think as you kind of described this one, Scott, there'll probably be people listening that would go, "Yeah, I've worked with that person." If maybe they'll say, "I am that person," in which case you probably need to be doing some work on that. But so let's talk about the narcissistic leader.
Yeah, so this obviously comes from Narcissus in Greek mythology. Can't leave the pond, looking at his reflection in the water, and it eventually kills him, right? So I think that this is people in ministry, the two most common fields that attract narcissistic personalities is the clergy and medicine. That's a random fact that I know. And it's because of this sense that people both in the clergy and in medicine can become glorified, like be seen as otherworldly or as better than other people. And so people with narcissistic tendencies tend to be drawn to ministry and tend to be drawn towards medicine. And there's an obsession in narcissism with a feeling of needing people's adoration and needing to be complimented and needing to be seen as important, and to be respected and to be seen as making these great accomplishments. And this can lead to all kinds of manipulation of people, emotional manipulation of people, and gaslighting and all of these things that can manipulate people so that the person feels good about themselves, and having to put other people down in order to feel good about yourself. And so I'll be honest, of all the things that are on this, this is the one that I battle, that must out of my temperament. It's my high I and my high D on the disc. Like, I really care about wanting to come across as competent and want people to, I want people generally to like me. So, but Lord willing, I don't think that this is like a real problem for me. I've worked with some real narcissists in my life, and it scared me to the point where I feel like I'm on guard against this all the time. I have to be careful because I think I can slip into this without paying attention. But it's one of the reasons why at my church, I volunteer in the live stream. I'm sitting in the back. I don't need to be up front, or I don't want to feel like I need to be up front all the time. I'm not saying I never would do anything up front at my church if they asked me, or if they if they needed my help, I would gladly step up. I don't. That's a joke. But I need to sit in the back a little bit because I need to not do things that are sort of likely to draw a compliment. Does that make sense? It's good for my sanctification to sit in the back and to not be seen or not noticed. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can benefit that way, that maybe don't even have that tendency to just, be somebody that's not in the spotlight or receiving adoration for the work that they're doing, because it's just as important. But yeah,
my encouragement. Right, I know we need to move on, but just since I understand this one really well, because I've battled this in my life, the biggest piece of advice I can give you, if this is something that you struggle with, is be willing to be led by someone else. You'll notice a lot of these guys that have narcissism, when they leave a church, they don't go to another church, they start another church because they can't stand to not be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you are the pastor of your church, find some other sphere in which you are willing to be led, where you are putting yourself in a place of submission. I'm going to submit to leadership. I'm not going to always speak up. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to be a follower. The best cure for narcissism is to be a follower some of the time. And find a way to do that. It's really important. If you're always the leader and you're always out front, you will obscure your ability to see how narcissistic you have become. So that, to me, that is the antidote to narcissism, is learning how to submit and to be a follower.
Well, I think, thinking back about churches that we've either worked with or that we've received calls from, it's very common that the church, the leadership structure of the church, in which we hear about these types of characteristics or witness them ourselves, are in these church leadership structures where the pastor is very much up at the point and has little to no accountability to anyone, to an elder board or some kind of a church council, or even any committees that have really almost any authority. And then, and we begin to see that super clearly. And again, we get calls from people, it might be some kind of a committee chairman or others, that they begin to talk to us about their church, and they explain what's going on and the issues that they're having. And then they tell us about their leadership structure, and about this individual that may be at the top that it has almost like these textbook characteristics. And then they would also be resistant. A lot of times we get these calls and it's like, our church, we would like to maybe move into a different authority structure, maybe perhaps elders or some kind of council, and our pastor's very resistant to it. Yeah, because he has these narcissistic characteristics to him. So yeah, this one does come up often. So it's interesting that you say that would be a clergy thing. Yeah, definitely.
I would just encourage you to don't think it's that's it, I'm a narcissist, there's no cure. I think it's a scale, it's a spectrum. Like, there are people who are extreme narcissists. The key to this, and I've written on this a couple articles. The key to this is self-awareness. Go, oh, I have this tendency, and you have to learn how to just resist that. And I think by God's grace, I don't know, you know me well, AJ. I don't think you would consider me a narcissist.
No,
I don't know. You could say it on the podcast if you thought that I was, but this is something I because I've been around it and I've seen it a lot. I try to monitor these tendencies in my own heart and try to battle against them as best I can.
You pegged into one or two other ones. That narcissistic wasn't the other. Wasn't that one? Anyway, our third one that we're talking about is the paranoid leader.
Okay. Oh, is it this one?
Just kidding. No, but that was good. Do you think I'm paranoid? What? Huh? Yeah. So the leader that might always feel threatened in their environment, and then again, sort of that cause and effect thing, they would react in a particular way, but thinking that something bad is about to happen, just being suspicious all the time, not trusting people, which is not a good way to lead or participate in a team environment. If you don't have trust in the people that you're doing ministry with, that's not going to be sustainable in effective ministry long term. So the paranoid leader can short circuit that or allow it to never even get off the ground.
Yeah, that's right. This would, I think, really tie in with the big 5 personality traits. I mean, this is we use DISC and Myers-Briggs, and none of these have technically been proven accurate. I mean, I think they're pretty accurate, but the big 5 personality traits, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, are the only 5 that have been proven through studies to be accurate. And I think this tie into paranoid leadership is a real tie to neuroticism. So, how neurotic are you? If you're really high on that neuroticism scale, you're probably going to be really paranoid as well. And it's just this sense that if you go to board meetings and you think at every board meeting, I might get fired at this board meeting, or someone's out to get me, or every time someone says, hey, can we meet? You think it's something bad. That might be a signal to you that it's you're dealing with some paranoia here, and you can't be in a good, healthy leadership space if you always think that every time someone contacts you, something's bad. It can also lead to, this can tie into obsessive compulsive, and there can be some tie-ins to narcissism here too. The tie into obsessive compulsive would be then the need for control. I need to be at every meeting. I feel like I got to be at every committee meeting because I want to know what's being said. That's paranoia. The tie into narcissism is the sense that people aren't respecting. I'm not getting the attention that I deserve and the sensitivity to criticism. Narcissistic people really don't like criticism at all. They can't tolerate it at all. And so that can lead to paranoia. So I think that these things are not necessarily in isolation. They can work in tandem with one another. And you might have a real tendency towards one, which leads to a minor tendency in another. I mean, I'll be honest. I think this would be another one that I'm not massively paranoid, but I can make some poor assumptions and go, oh, this is going to be bad. So I don't think I'm massively paranoid, but I think that's tied to my narcissistic tendencies, is my sensitivity to criticism, which is, again, something I worked on. I'm way more open to criticism today than I was 15 years ago. So we all have room to grow. Yeah.
Hey man, this is a good therapy session for you.
I'm just trying to be open, right?
Yeah. I'm not.
Come on, AJ, open up.
I'm not showing my hand to anybody. I'm not telling anybody what my problems are.
Hey, listen, if you're open and honest with people, AJ, people reciprocate. I'll meet a podcast listener and they'll go, hey, I appreciate that you were honest about your narcissistic tendencies and your paranoia. Either that or they won't want to work with me.
They'll meet me and they'll go, we know you're a narcissist because you wouldn't tell us about anything wrong with you.
You don't think anything's wrong with you.
Okay, our fourth one is the codependent leader. So, all right, so Scott, by definition, does the codependent leader have to have somebody enabling them into this kind of dysfunction?
Yeah, good question. I think it's the sense of the need to always be in, like, I can't be alone. I really need someone to walk me through. This is not something I struggle with, by the way. I've been very honest. This is not one that I'm totally fine being on. And you don't struggle with this one either. Neither of us are codependent. Codependency does not necessarily mean the sense that you need other people, because everyone needs other people. I'm having a car problem right now and I'm not handy. AJ is helping me figure out what is wrong with my car. I don't think that's being codependent. That's just good.
That's resourcefulness.
It's just friendship. Yeah. So that, don't think, oh man, I feel better when I have friends help me with things, I must be codependent. That's not what that means. Codependent people fear being rejected, abandoned. They can't function on their own. They have to be in a relationship. They have to have someone near them. And in a church setting, they are the folks who will do anything to avoid conflict. You know, if there's a stronger, more vocal person, and this is really bad if you're the senior pastor, and you can basically just be bullied by anyone who's loud. That's not good. You know, that's something that a codependent person does, is they're like, wow, I couldn't stand to lose this person. If you think the worst thing that could happen to me is someone would leave my church because of something that I said, even if it's the truth, that's codependency. Like I have to have these people in my life, and I will do anything it takes to keep them around, even if that means sabotaging the vision and the direction and the truth, and what's good and right and true, all of that. If I'll sacrifice all that so people won't leave me, that's not good. And we see this a lot actually in church. So I think codependency is more common in church than we would maybe think at first blush.
And and they can be paired up with a narcissist as well. So it's those folks maybe that a narcissistic leader, and they've got, like a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 folks around them that you're like, why do they continuously support this? They could be displaying, more of a codependency, in which they feel compelled that they've got to let this person kind of have this level of control and maintain it.
Yeah, what's interesting, not to get too sidetracked here, but I would immediately think, oh, this is the bullies, sort of toadies, or it's the people who are the tag-alongs. But in church settings, very often the codependent folks are the ones who have the titles. It's the pastor, it's the staff people, and then there are really vocal folks in the congregation, patriarch type people or influential folks. They're the narcissists. They're calling the shots, and you have these sort of, sorry, my bias is showing, but we have these sort of weakling leaders who are like, I can't say anything to them because they'll leave and they give a lot of money. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you think the Lord is going to punish you for doing the right thing?
Yeah.
You think God is going to let your church wither and die because you stood up for the truth and what's good? So that it's something that annoys me. That's a signal I'm not codependent, but it's common. So no judgment on you if that's something that you struggle with, but you need to be self-aware of it and go, hey, I can't sacrifice doing the right thing just because I might lose some people in the process.
Yeah. Those situations make it clear to me I did not miss my calling as a therapist, because I just want to yell and go, stop. And now let's move on.
Maybe that's what people need in therapy, though. I don't know. I'm not a therapist either.
Maybe they do. They're not going to get it from me. So, yeah, I just want them to stop.
Act like a man.
All right. The last one is the passive aggressive leader. So, and another hyphenate. We started with obsessive compulsive, and we get another hyphenated issue here, Scott, in passive aggressive. So this is, I guess, this gets thrown around a lot also. Are they being passive aggressive? Yeah, maybe they are. This maybe is even one of the more common things that people do in an avoidance of conflict, in ways of kind of getting out what their real feelings are without directly conflicting anybody about it or having a tough conversation. And I think social media has really enabled passive aggressive behavior in people. It's also allowed simply aggressive behavior in people. But even on social media, not everybody is comfortable just really confronting someone about something, but you'll certainly get it in the post a week later when they're tiptoeing around,
Oh yeah,
saying
people.
something about
I
somebody
don't like
else.
it when people do blah blah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. See,
Oh my
my
gosh.
natural tendency is just towards to be aggressive, and so I feel like I display some passive aggressive tendencies in my attempt to tamp down my aggressive personality. I find myself. I read some of this. I'm like, oh yeah, I think I do this sometimes, but it's in an attempt to get away from the just flat out aggression, which is my which is my natural state is just to be mean.
I tend towards that as well. So that's an interesting concept then, that passive
Like
aggressive is simply reduced aggression.
just reduced aggression is passive aggression. So I don't know what that says about me. My tendency is to just be aggressive. But I'm like, well, I need to be nice. So then I find myself doing things that are passive aggressive. I'm like, that's not any better. But I think that's not what we're talking about here. I think this is mainly aimed at people who this is their default primary mode of dealing aggressively is and dealing with conflict is. And what does this look like? This looks like not replying to a text message on purpose, or trying to control people by showing up late to things and, it's just, and yeah, posting things like I have a prayer request. And then the prayer request is very directed at some situation with some person who's sitting in the room and everyone knows it and you're just not saying it. Those kinds of things are just very uncomfortable for everyone. And, you just want to say, just say it. Just say the thing. Say the thing that everyone is thinking. So,
Yeah.
this
I
is
think,
common in the church, passive aggressive.
yeah. And I think you see this financially in the church. Some decisions get made that people don't agree with, and they're like, think I'll not drop my check in the plate this week, or I'm going to reduce it by 50% for a while. So, I mean, that would be a passive aggressive response to something, and is, I guess, has a level of immaturity to it. I don't know if that would also always be the case in passive aggressiveness, but that's the way it appears to people, I think, on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah. It just think it's a way to leverage otherwise normal behavior in an attempt to control a situation or people.
Yeah.
It's like everyone forgets to reply to a text. Everyone is late sometimes. Everyone does, but if I'm doing these things on purpose in a plotted way, in a way to leverage myself against other people, that's passive aggressive, and then when they get called on it, they go, oh, no, I didn't do that. I worked with a leader within the last couple of years who was very passive aggressive, and boy, was it irritating, because anytime you would call him on it, he would say, oh, no, I wasn't doing that. I was, to have a perfectly rational sounding explanation for his behavior and why it was what it was. And I was like, I wanted to punch him so hard. I didn't, though. I didn't do that.
Again, that aggression.
That's just flat out aggression. Yeah.
Plain old aggression. Scott's going to be working on that for a while.
Yeah, so welcome to Scott being vulnerable and AJ not.
Stonewalling.
I think we've had a few of these episodes before.
Yeah. And I just write more notes in my notebook.
We're going to crack that hard shell of AJ Matthew eventually, dear listener. Just keep listening. One of these days, he's going to open up and tell us all his feelings.
Full on sobbing. Oh boy.
Don't hold your breath.
All right. Well, there you go. A little look at 5 common leadership disorder-ish characteristics. Again, we are not professionals qualified to diagnose anybody. We just want to make you aware of things, really, to make you a better leader, because you might recognize some of these in yourself or in others that would help you to be able to deal with people on your team that would just make your ministry more effective. So Again, you can head on over to Amazon and pick up Developing Emotionally Mature Leaders by Aubrey Malphurs, which I think when I looked yesterday was on sale pretty cheap, like $5 or $6.
Well, those sales are short-lived, so by the time this airs, that might not be true anymore.
Maybe not. So, all right, I can't guarantee that price. I don't work for Amazon, but you might want to go check that out. And there's a link to it in today's show notes that I talked about earlier in the episode, which is over at malphursgroup.com/183. And also, as I mentioned in there, there's just a quick little couple sentences of perhaps a biblical example of each of these, or people in the Bible that perhaps displayed characteristics that might have fit in this. Again, I don't think Aubrey was in any way diagnosing historical figures with any kind of disorder. But again, that's not what we're doing here either. We're saying, you know what? Hey, maybe you've got this tendency or that tendency, and that would be something great to work on. So thanks for being with us on the Church Revitalization Podcast this week. We're glad you were. And while you're over there reading today's show notes, click on the donate button up there in the upper right-hand corner and consider how your church might be able to partner with us in our mission to make church leaders and churches in general more effective at making and maturing disciples of Jesus around the world, where we do all of that work at no cost to those churches. We need your help to do that. So consider partnering with us today and drop us a line to talk. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.